I thought it would be really nice to kind of follow your work in an intuitive way, and really to look at it from this approach. So I've read Ensoulment, and I feel like that is very much um, part of my memory complex somewhere. I trust that
Yes.
through osmosis, I really connected to the book.
Mm,
um, and it really, yeah, it came at the right time for me, and I remember being moved by it.
mm,
And something I really appreciate about the work that you do is your ability to map and to really bring a lot of stuff forward that is invisible for many, and abstract, and to really kind of map that.
mm.
um, so I'd love for us to explore it kind of intuitively, to explore this question of connecting to the soul, and to just see where we go from there ultimately.
Mm. Nice. Nice. Great. I would love that. I would love that. You know what would help me
Hmm.
in this process is your authentic, kind of in the moment, curious questions.
Yeah.
Because ensoulment is like it's a whole territory, it's a whole field. And, it's like you're going to a new land
Mm-hmm.
and you can explore the food, the fashion, the landscapes, the animals, the people, the culture, the language. There's so many aspects to it. So what would help is out of your curiosity, because even in this interview, there's an ensoulment process going on.
Hmm.
So it's your soul calling my soul, calling the soul of this dance between us. And the soul, I mean the essence of something. And we'll talk about essence and how do you distinguish that. But there's a soul of our relating, which we immediately clicked when we saw each other at Sand a few years ago. And then we continue to correspond. So this would not have happened if our soul would not have somewhat seen each other. So
Yeah.
our soul have seen each other, then the human aspect of us see each other, then we connect, and then we have this interview. So this interview is like a birth. It
Hmm.
really takes me to every moment is a birth of dancing souls creating something. And the moment is full. It's always full. Even if you're sitting in
Yeah.
your own room, completely disconnected from the world, the moment is full. And we created this moment. And now some of the audience, some of the people who are going to listen to this interview, they are going to tap into a birth of what we're creating. So when you bring in your authentic
Mm.
questions to my authentic response, that's a very high grade ensoulment interaction.
Yes. I
Yeah,
love that.
and by the way, why people love nature so much, why people love to sing, to
Mm.
dance, to jam, jazz, to be in nature, to walk, to swim, because these are very ensouled encounters with animals.
Mm.
Even if you're, let's say, a programmer and you're writing C++ or you're writing Java, or you're writing something, but when you're really on to something, this is very, very much ensoulment, and these are ensouled activities.
Hmm.
So now we're engaged in an ensouled interview, and we're going to try to reveal, to see what's really relevant for
Yeah.
people today, like 2022, this month, this day. What is
Hmm.
relevant really? Because what is relevant today was not relevant 2 years ago and three
Yeah.
years ago. We've seen
Yeah.
it, you know? Yeah.
It makes me instantly want to, and I'll just follow this. The first place I actually want to go to from what you shared, which is beautiful, and I really I resonate a lot with this. The purposeful nature of being in essence, and what emerges from there. And I've had this thought or idea or something I've played with for a while around the purpose of this, and the kind of matrix of ensoulment, to use that term. And even like what you point to in our discussion, and the kind of connection that we have, there's something in that we probably can't comprehend or understand consciously, that could be completely relevant for people listening in a different way, almost like you know, any perspective for whatever position someone is in when they listen, their emotional landscape. Like there's a message that can apply in so many different ways. So I really like that idea of it being collaborative, also with people listening and tuning in.
Yes. So it's interesting because we don't even know who's going to listen,
Mm-hmm.
but their energy, their soul is already here and it's already
Mm-hmm.
listening.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it's a co-arising, co-emergent process.
Mm-hmm.
And time is not linear. It's not past, present, and future. There's
Yeah.
a co-arising. Now,
Yeah.
just to make it easy for whoever has just encountered the word ensoulment, ensoulment is the ongoing process of connecting, embodying, and expressing the soul. So connecting, embodying, and expressing the soul. That's ensoulment. And everything goes through ensoulment. Everything that is alive goes through ensoulment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Even water can go through an ensoulment.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about the soul, we're talking about the innermost essence. And the innermost essence, which is very unique, it's unique not only to the person or the thing, it's also unique to the moment, it's unique to the place. So
Mm-hmm.
this is an incredible, imagine a kaleidoscope. Any angle you move the kaleidoscope, all of a sudden a new image arises. This is exactly our
Yes.
own magical existence. Okay. And maybe we can talk later about, anxiety and fears and
Mm-hmm.
depression and paranoia. And we can talk about these. How are they relevant to ensoulment? And
Yeah.
what could ensoulment do for them?
Yeah.
Because look at the state of the world. Come on, we're killing everything. We're war.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
Oh yeah. And I'm going to trust that. I feel like we're going to jump around, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy to do that, at least in the beginning, as we kind of work through this.
Yes.
But when you say that, I think of very recently there have been studies. I think it was a systemic review around the theory of the chemical imbalance theory of depression. And I feel like anyone, like if you've experienced depression to an extent, if you have an interest in spirituality, if you have a meditation practice, or you're in your own journey of ensoulment, then there is that question mark. It doesn't add up, the purely mechanical approach. And that's maybe something we can look at is, ensoulment is the missing piece, and consciousness
Mm-hmm.
as an influencer of the mechanical and the neurological as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll go there at some point. We'll arrive there.
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
I'd love to hear about your background and your kind of journey into this, and a bit of background in your practice, your spirituality, how you arrived at the curiosity around ensoulment.
Yes. Wow. You know, there's the background and then there's the process of revealing ensoulment or discovering ensoulment. So my background, I was a system engineer in IT, director in high-tech companies in the Silicon Valley. And then I was working on large-scale corporate enterprise systems, which really created in my brain, created a way of looking at the interconnectedness of things. Because when you work on a system, you know how moving one area changes the entire system. So there's like an interconnectedness of the processes and the elements of the system. So that kind of cultivated. I'm an engineer by kind of diploma,
Mm-hmm.
a system engineer, but regardless, it really allowed me to actually see the interconnected of everything. This is a long time ago. I'm talking 20 years ago.
Okay. Yeah.
So this was my background, and then my background started shifting. I have always been interested in esoteric, mysticism, energy, and at some point, I started learning that in a deeper way. So I studied with Ken Wilber and the Integral
Mm-hmm.
Institute. I studied with JFK. I studied at CIIS, California Institute of Integral Studies. But these just gave me like, wow! All of a sudden I found out that there are many people who are inquiring into the nature of reality, the nature of existence, the nature of consciousness, the nature of interconnectedness, and how we fit in. So that kind of gave me the playground and the language. But at some point, which was about 15 years ago, I went my own way. That started about 15 years ago. Now I can look back and see that I actually descended into the underworld myself. The word depression is kind of a too generic of a word.
Yeah.
But definitely I was asking questions like, who the fuck am I? What the fuck did I come to do here? This is what I'm going to do. Fly to Chicago, fly back to this, do another project, do another this. Is this it? No way. Sorry, no fucking way. So all these questions started coming, and I did not like the answers I was getting at all, because the answers were not quite fulfilling. They were not quite like, yeah. And not only that, the answers I got, who am I? What am I doing here? And how can I actually be here in this world in a sane way? None of these questions had an answer. So I had to really go into the underworld. And that's another thing I want to say. And it's a part of Ensoulment in the first book. The second book came out this year in January. So that's a much deeper, much more kind of cosmological. The first book is more of like a personal journey. The second has much more of a collective cosmological importance of embodying the soul of the world and the soul of the planet and the soul of humanity. So that's the second book. But in the first book, when I went down into the underworld, and the underworld, it's mean my own underworld, all the places that I disowned, that I didn't like, that I judged myself, that I was afraid, that I was ashamed of, all these places I had to go in and say, okay, let's look at them, let's befriend them. So I had to go this. And in Ensoulment 1, I talk about the kind of the 5 phases that reveal themselves, which is the waking up, that oh my God, I have dimensions to my soul that I've never tapped into. So there's a waking up to the soul, to your own soul. There's the descent into soullessness, all the places that are soulless. Depression is soullessness, and and I'm gonna talk about it.
A loss of vitality.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you had the ensoulment process, and then the connection with the soul of the world. Okay, so all these phases, you go through them in different aspects of your life, and depression is literally marking the soullessness phase of your coming into your own soul in a particular area of your life. Okay, so it's actually a very healthy process. It's like fever is a really healthy articulation of the body when you have fever, or so you understand. So all disease is actually a healthy phase of healing. Okay, so I said that because there's the kind of technical, mechanical, philosophical, mental background that I had, but then I had my own journey. And in this journey, when I went down, all of a sudden I encountered all the places in me that I really did not like. I did not like about myself, and I didn't like about the world. I was afraid, I was ashamed, so I had to encounter them one by one. And I had to kind of dwell. I don't know if you've ever had a medicine journey, where you see only this, like, really the underworld, and you have things crawling on you. This is what I had to do for a while. And I had to dwell there in the soullessness of my own soul, and gradually start to go through my own alchemical process. And after that, you start to become ensouled. And how do you know that you start to become ensouled? All of a sudden, there's like a peacefulness, inner peace, that nothing matters. Whatever happens, there's like a peace and glimpses of joie de vivre. Glimpses. I cannot say joie de vivre, not yet. Glimpses start to come. Like, oh, I was happy like last night. Oh my God, I was waiting. I was like, okay, that was nice. So then you kind of churn. You churn with yourself. You churn with your soullessness. You churn with the world, churning it like a stew, like a soup. You go through your own alchemical process, and then all of a sudden, a dish, something that has flavor starts to emerge, and that's your soul. Okay? But I've rarely seen anybody goes to an ensoulment without everything you were describing earlier. The soulless places.
Wow. I absolutely love that description. I love that description. And I remember that reading your book, the potency of that shadow work that you did, it really struck me. And it relates a lot as well to, there are, practices of self-actualization and this kind of non-dual approach as well that tries to bypass content. And when you open up to the magnitude of that underworld, it cannot be bypassed. Like you say, it's got to be engaged with in a really healthy way. And yeah, I love this alchemical approach because it's yeah, go on.
Yes. And you know what, Ricky? The thing is, it's not like you decide, okay, on Monday, I'm going to start my shadow work. Then
Exactly. Yeah.
life is going to bring it to you, like the
Yeah.
stream of life.
Yeah.
Stream of life is going to bring you a really challenging day, a really like, oh my God, a really challenging period. I actually just went through a very challenging period, 3 months. It lasted 3 months, just the last April, May, June. And it was so challenging. It's my core relationship with my mother. And there's some things there that are so painful and so unresolved yet that I had to go through it. And it was very challenging. It was so challenging that, okay, I knew I'm going through my ensoulment process with my mom. I knew it.
Yeah.
And I had my whole back was like, I had issues with my back. I had issues with like physical issues and then emotional and then couldn't sleep. And then, so all this is happening. But the thing is, as you're going through it, there's a part of your soul that is seeing through this kind of dark night of the soul or
Yeah.
dark month of the soul. You're seeing through and you say, okay, I know I'm going through it. I'm just going to do what I need to do. So I went to my own healers. I went to see my own colleagues. I went to see my own processes, and you just go through it. So it's not like you have to say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to start my shadow. No, it's going to come with you. The question is whether you're going to say, hello, shadow. Hello, that's
Yes.
really painful. Okay, I know you come here to include and transcend, so I can move to the next level of ensoulment. So I was doing all this, but still it was painful. So the good news is the more you do this work, the duration in which you stay in the illusion of the pain body is much shorter.
Yeah.
Which means you can be sometimes days and you're out of it, sometimes months. I mean, if it's something that I'm dealing, which is lifelong, it's 3 months, but I feel so much better. And I did a few things. I mean, I said, okay, I need to see this guy, I need to see this person. And I kind of constellated my people, and I said, okay, I'm going to invest in that and I'm going to go do it. And every day sit down and see what's going on, like in my own self. So there's like your inner process yourself, and then you get help, and then you're past this period. It's almost like, the graduation exams or the finals. You got to go through it, something like that.
Wow. Okay. I've got a million directions to go in. Right. So one thing that came to mind when you were talking, and I imagine you're someone who, and just for people listening, like some way this is described as like the imaginal realm, right? Or like the unconscious, really diving into the like depths of the psychology, the ocean of unconsciousness and what is found there. And something that I love about Jungian philosophy is like the richness of these landscapes and how they've been articulated so well in a way that, the mythological, I was thinking this the other day, like the embodiment of the mythological, because we have like the cognitive and the emotional aspects of being, but there is like a real slaying of the dragon kind of process that you have to go through a lot of the time, or a befriending even, to see the innocence of the dragon behind that fire breath, but I was going to say, I imagine you're someone who, when you're in this process and you think, there are ways that you could be supportive, that you're always looking at that from a point of what will be reflected to me, like what intelligence will this show me from someone else, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, beautiful.
So, oh wow, okay. So from that, and I'd like to look at as a process. So for me, having experience,
I want to say something. The imaginal realm, you and I share that. The imaginal realm and the Jungian psychology and the Jungian philosophy. But it's really like, it talks to my soul. I mean, Carl Jung, the way he writes, what he writes, what he's seen, how he dared to express that in, like 50 years ago. So he is he resonates with my own soul, part of my soul journey. But it's really important that the audience and you and I and other people will actually see what resonates with them, because some people are not verbal at all. They're not
Yeah, that's a good
psychological
point.
at all. They're just about sensations or color or music.
Mm.
I mean, you can do your whole ensoulment process through music. So I'm saying this because you have a primary soul frequency, like you have your soul frequency. Each one of us, each thing have the plant. I want even to say the sofa. Everything we are on and in have a
Yeah.
primary frequency
Yeah.
or primary song. Okay, the American
Mm-hmm.
Indian, they used to talk about the song of the newborn, that they would be
Mm-hmm.
singing the song before he or she were born. So you have a song. That song resonates with other songs. So it's really important to find the body of knowledge or the body of wisdom or the body of practice that resonates with your soul. Because if you try
Yeah.
to do things that are just because everybody used that, who cares? It's not your soul, it's not your frequency.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing about ensoulment. It's extremely individual, extremely individual.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's so unique. Like your frequency is like no other frequency around the cosmos, not the planet, the cosmos. So you
Yeah.
are so unique. So when you find your own song and you resonate with the song that will support you and help you, then you're good. You're good to go. Then you go through your
Yeah.
journey with these partnering songs.
Yeah, I like that, bringing awareness to that. Like you say, I imagine we share this real visual field. Like I experience a lot of strong visualizations, and um, it is as an embodiment process. There's a lot emotional that people experience a lot through dance and movement. Like you say, there are many avenues to it. With with that, and I just think of this paradigm shift in terms of looking at what we label depression or anxiety or different disorders or paranoia or psychosis, these really challenging times. There is an opportunity to view that from a perspective of a call to action, like the hero's journey being embarked upon. And for some people listening to that, depending on their worldview, that might seem wishful thinking. It might seem like it minimizes the process, but I really feel that there's a teaching element to these experiences. As you say, it's this soulful part of the psyche, the essence trying to communicate. And the more I've studied psychology in different areas, you see that almost every leading psychologist or philosopher, they will look at it from an approach of that call is exactly what you need, be it the song, be it the visualization, be it the string of synchronicities that lead to a practice that allows you to embody that. And for me, like that, like the experience of not being able to ignore it, because you mentioned shadow work not being something you choose, was I'm thinking now, I'm like going back through my history, and I feel I've had different elements of that. Like I've had a cognitive with really strong ruminations and intrusive thoughts. I've had an emotional from really intense anxiety, um, the depression. Not that for me is anti-emotion almost. It's just like there's like an empty space, 0 point something. But with the visualization, there was a lot around that, almost like an overspill from the imaginal, and auditory as well for me, with like hallucinations and like conversations that would continue, because there was this, it was like the inner essence starting to spill out into my reality, and then I was having to discern from that, well, where are the boundaries? Clearly there's an interconnection. How do I appreciate and embody that interconnection without losing my sense of self, if that makes sense?
Amazing.
Yeah. And I remember I went to an event around Jungian philosophy, and it was talking about myth, and how Jung described some experiences of psychosis as that overspill. like the contents of the unconscious are just like they're there. They have to be.
Yes.
They have to be dealt with.
Yes. So look, there's a process of, so you have your soul. Your soul is always with you. There's a process of connecting with your soul, which is crucial. I mean, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to know your soul, to connect with your soul, and to allow your soul to be inside your body. Because sometimes only 20% of your soul is in your body. When you go to sleep, it's completely different. When you are in a psychosis, it's completely different, okay? So there are parallel processes that are happening. One is the presence of your soul. Like, where's my soul? Where's my soul? Okay. There's the pain body going crazy when you are triggered or when you are going through some challenges. Then there's a process of understanding your landscape. So when I talk about landscape, there's a psychic landscape, there's essential landscape, there's physical landscape, there's all these landscapes.
Yes.
Landscape is like really knowing the lay of your land. Very important. Now, because I work in ensoulment, and after this body of knowledge was discovered, it was discovered through just automatic writing. And then I developed it, and then people came to me with many questions, and I started channeling these answers, and then work emerged. Okay, so as this body of knowledge came, a big part of ensoulment is actually the ability to transform where you are into where you want to be headed. Okay, so there's a great power that you have here as a transformer of reality, of your own reality. The most powerful place to transform is your own reality. When you're able to transform your own reality, you can transform, then you can just go about your day and see all realities around you transforming. And that's about the nature of reality, which I talk about in the second book. But I'm going back to say, there's connection to the soul. There's understanding the pain body and knowing how to work with the pain body. Sometimes it's just like, oh, come here, baby. You just like, oh, I love you.
The soothing element.
Yeah, and sometimes it's slaying the dragon with the pain body. And sometimes it's melting it away, seeing through it. So there's all these ways, but understanding the landscape is very important. And now I'm going to the point of why understanding the landscape is so important. Because in this psychic landscape, there's also disembodied being. Okay, so you have being that are feeding off. There's entities, and like they talk about it in Christianity and all this, like exorcism and all this. I've really seen them because I've been doing this work for so long, for over 15 years. I've been working with people, and I literally see sometimes they are non-physical entities lurking in their space, kind of doing. So you got to know how to actually deal with these little gremlins that are coming in and like, excuse me, get out. No, not interested. No. And you can, even once you start really understanding your psychic landscape and your physical, mental, emotional, and etheric, energetic landscape, you can actually start to say, no, I'm not going there. Like you're not driving through Harlem at 2 a.m. in the morning on this. It's like, no, okay. So there are places that you don't get into. It's like, no, sorry, I'm going to drive right by. So in order to do that, there's some authority, seniority, agency that you develop just in your psychic. There's nothing you have to do. You just see everything, and you see, like, for example, people who are depressed, people who have manic depressive episodes or psychotic episodes. There's interference, and I can talk later. What is interference and how does it work? What does it mean when a psychic pattern comes in and lodge in your field and just stay there, hangs out? So, but there are ways to dissolve all these, okay? And you can do it yourself in your own imagination, in your own intuition, actually. So it's not that you need to go to a healer. I mean, sometimes it's nice to go to somebody, but you don't have to. That's what I'm trying to say. But understanding the landscape, understanding who's, like, for me, because I am a kind of a war refugee, and we had a lot of trauma in my early childhood, and we had a lot of loss and grief and pain. I also suffered from years of anxiety blended with grief, tons of anxiety with grief. Every little thing, oh, I'm so sad, and I'm also anxious at the same time that I'm sad. So I noticed that this pattern is actually like it's like my default. I default to it
Mm-hmm.
anytime. And I was like, okay, but maybe there's another way. Maybe there's a way to actually celebrate her beauty right now. And that, so you can actually reframe when you see you keep driving to the same place all the time. You can say, hey, why don't I take this route this time?
Yeah.
And when you connect it to your soul, you know your pain body, you know your
Mm-hmm.
landscape, you can navigate. And that's what I want to bring people back to, their own navigation of their own reality.
Mm-hmm.
That's critical.
Mm-hmm. That's the real truest sense of empowerment, isn't it? To understand, and one thing I want to note is how the conventional Western worldview makes 90% of this landscape impossible through its very narrow view. And I feel like this is a really integral, for a lot of people, a starting point of giving themselves permission to explore these landscapes, because we're gaslighted into their non-existence so much from, misguided different agendas at play, different kind of societal structures. I really appreciate that you mentioned the entity stuff. I
Yeah.
really appreciate that, again, like trusting there's probably a diverse, in terms of the people listening and watching, like a diverse section of people. And we're really talking to what I would describe as like beyond the veil. Like when you go into, like, anyone seriously following their own self-inquiry will have this like universal opening of, okay, there's so much more here than I thought, that I was unconscious of, and including these realms. And I feel that having a map for that is so important, so that people can understand, like, there are phenomenons of consciousness that are grossly overlooked in like mainstream psychology. And I just love that we're touching upon that.
Oh yeah, we have to touch, because most of life is actually unseen. Most of life has
Mm-hmm.
not been discovered. Most of life is beyond the veil. It's almost like
Yeah.
you have an iceberg. 90 some percent is at the bottom, inside, buried under the ocean, and only
Mm-hmm.
a few percent is up there.
Yeah.
So now look, I want to say, I want to give the power to the people. What do I mean by that? When you start your ensoulment process, you are becoming fearless.
Mm-hmm.
Fearless, I mean, you completely see how fear is an illusion.
Mm-hmm.
The same way you can completely see that the whole pandemic was a complete illusion. I'm sorry. And I won't get into it, okay? But there's a way in which you can actually start to see beyond, and you don't
Yeah.
subscribe to the
Yeah.
misinformation, you don't subscribe to the mass media, you don't subscribe to the doctor told me, you don't subscribe to the psychiatrist told me. You start seeing truth with your own eyes, because
Mm-hmm.
eventually it's your own truth. Okay,
Yeah.
so if you're choosing to create ongoingly depression, sadness, psychotic breakdowns,
Mm-hmm.
paranoia, it's fascinating. It's like, oh, let's see, why is my landscape looking like this? Let's see. Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Oh, I have this thing going on. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm really afraid of that. Okay. So, but I have to tell you, once you really awaken, you really see that 99.9, all possibilities, there's nothing to be afraid.
Yeah.
But you can't get
Yeah.
there unless you go through the veil of fear, because I went through it as well. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But you
Mm-hmm.
got to take the reign back. You got to take the reign of your own reality creation into your own hands.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean that you don't consult with people, like the
Mm-hmm.
president have many consultants. That's fine, but he's the president, or
Mm-hmm.
she soon. Giving back the reign to you, to say, "Ooh, look at my landscape. Ooh, look at this creature
Yeah.
always showing up with this dark hood over his head and
Mm-hmm.
coming, wanting to slay it." Like, oh, interesting. Talk to me. Tell me more. The same way Carl Jung has this whole working with the imagination, right? You can start to work with the landscapes around you, inside you and around you. And
Mm-hmm.
then say, I wonder why I'm doing this. Why am I keep defaulting into this? I mean, I did it with my kind of anxiety, grief thing. Every little
Mm-hmm.
thing, I would just start sobbing. It's like, what are you sobbing? I would just start sobbing, and
Yeah.
then I would get anxious, and then I go back. It's like, okay, but that's just a way of being. So, okay, you could go to a psychiatrist and say, okay, I need some meds to kind of stop this and give me some Cipralex, whatever. But how about you take a look at it? Just befriend it. They say, befriend your psychosis, befriend. I mean, with psychosis, it's tricky because part of you is fragmented and then there's a whole other energy that comes in. But with most of the kind of imbalance that you experience, you can just see right through it and say, okay, let me see what's happening here. Why am I afraid all the time? Why anxiety comes out as a default? Why? Tell me more. And just look at it. Now, the power that I want to bring back to the people, the same way you created yourself in your mother's womb, you created yourself. Your mother did not do it. Your father did. They were just having a great time and you created yourself, okay? So if you created yourself, of course you can look at your psyche, see it for what it is, and start creating something that feels right for you, that feels installed for you. Of course you can do it, you know? You created yourself.
Yeah.
In every moment.
So this is one of the most important aspects, I think, of this paradigm shift, right? In terms of we are conditioned, and I'll talk, when I say we, I mean, like, you know, growing up in the UK, white, working class male, started to get educated and then learned about the material, you know, and thought that was what intelligence meant, you know, and that very narrow kind of material view. You know, there's this lack in that. If the material is primary, there is this dismissal of consciousness as that creatorship, like what you mentioned, the real creative power of consciousness. And you know, if there's a message for people with this, the earnestness of this as a practice, it goes back to that unconditional love element and that nourishing element of like whatever you lean into does transform and is carried by love. And that sounds so like new age in a way, but it's true, right? Like when you actually, this is experiential. This is something to be experienced. And, you know, it really is. And this is why for me, meditation has been like the life-changing practice, because it's allowed me to not identify so much with the contents and to really step into that witness of stuff going on, and of course getting caught in the contents and caught in the fear and caught in the illusion. But meditation as a practice, as a way to create that distance, is so transformative. And you know, it really, what you talk to, this curiosity, this willingness to engage, that's when the magic happens, right? That's when the transformation and the alchemy happens. In my experience, you know, it's the resistance that's the real suffering. Pain is always tolerable, but the resistance and the suffering and the, you know, refusing the call, that for me is like the most painful.
Resistance to what? Resistance to what?
Resistance to, like, throughout my life, I've not had much choice around like doing the work because it's been so invasive, you know. So I say that, you know, I've had spells of being suicidal, for example, where if you're in that space, you're like, well, this is a life or death matter. This is survival. I have to go in. I have to understand this. And the same with, and just from my experience of this, you know, it'll be maybe a really troubling emotion. You know, those really like those heavy emotions, like the shame, the guilt, anxiety I've always struggled with. When they're present and invasive enough that they're affecting, because that's how my path has unfolded, where it's been so invasive that I've just had to confront it in a lot of different ways. So for me, the resistance comes with, in my conscious experience right now, there's something that I feel is trying to get my attention. And at this point in my journey, I'm fortunate enough to know that when I give it attention, that's actually when I become closer to myself and closer to God, and kind of fall through into the abyss and then realize like there's nothing really behind that. But to say that and then to experience that is far different. So recently, I was sharing just before with you, and we had a call, I think a few months ago, I was going through a resurfacing of paranoia and psychosis, but from a much different space. And you mentioned earlier the spaciousness around experience as that expands. And there was resistance in the beginning because it was, the practicality was just walking down the street was suffering. It was painful. It was like, even with all the practice that I've got, I started to become hyper aware of this paranoid edge to my experience. And there was a lot of resistance there to that call. Yeah, I understand that that was
Okay.
calling me.
So when you have very invasive thought patterns, behaviors, uh, feelings, emotions, even in that point, when they're very invasive, they're literally taking over, there is a way to see through them and make a choice. So it's a state in which, this is why the soul work is so important, because when your soul is present and you have very invasive paranoia, you see through it, and there's an agency, there's a way in which, almost like you don't believe it. Okay, so almost like you go to see a movie, it's in a big theater, really, it looks and sounds so real, but even as you're seeing the movie, you're like, I know it's not real. I know it was just, so there's a way in which you can see through all this fluctuation, invasive fluctuation, and you see your truth, which your truth is love and light and essence and soul. This is your truth. And when you see through it, you don't just succumb to it. You don't just like, oh, well, I was just sad. I was just suicidal. You can see through it. And this is the wakefulness of the soul, because the soul will show you once you've seen it. Listen, you don't have to see it all the time. Enough that one time you see the truth, one time, even a glimpse, millisecond, that's it. It doesn't grab you anymore. All these invasive states don't grab you anymore. Okay, so and that's really important, because like when I was going through this rough time, I knew I have to sort things out in myself, in my relationship, in the physical realm, emotional realm, mental realm. I had to but throughout the whole time, I knew, okay, Natalie, you're going through this episode and you're going to move through it, and I kind of see the essence of it all. Through it, as I'm suffering, I am suffering, but I see the essence through it. And when you see the essence through things, it's like watching a movie and knowing that it's just a movie. And that really, it kind of relaxes you and relaxes the grip that this episode has on you.
Right. So this is really touching upon a really crucial distinction for me, right?
Yes.
And I love what you're saying. And that for me is a big part of like non-duality as an embodied practice.
Yes.
Connecting to the stillness, the inherent peacefulness and love of consciousness, of awareness. But then also the reality of, the reality for the majority of people, at least everyone that I know, even people that are in the field and they've been doing this for years, is that non-dual awareness doesn't lead to like eternal bliss or no phenomena of consciousness. It's like a spaciousness behind that. And that's something I've been grateful for with this resurfacing, knowing that it was purposeful. So there's like a willingness to engage from that essence, which for me is like, I absolutely love this. I talk of enchantment, right? You were at the talk at Sand 3 years ago now, I think it was. And that for me is enchantment, the process of not, oh, Ricky, you're paranoid, you're having some kind of psychotic break again, which I felt, that there was that pull towards that occasionally, but I was like, no, I know where I'm at. I'm grounded. This is purposeful. It became, what is this trying to show me? And there's an intelligence and there's a
nice,
a portal and a pathway
Nice.
if that's inquired into, and this phenomenon is metaphysical, but I experience this every time. And what I mean by that is, if I do that leaning in, if I do that exploration, I excavate more content that is encoded with the solution. Like we talk of the pandemic, and I just think of like the concept of a vaccine. We won't go down that route at all. We won't. But the concept of it, right? Like the disease as the cure. That there's this in my reality. And I was doing that because I couldn't quite get my grounding for a while in terms of what work do I have to do. And I was doing a lot of stuff, really like recentering my conscious awareness, because I would, as you mentioned, like I'd feel the fragmentation of my consciousness. So ultimately, as an experience, part of my consciousness would be in a place, and then a projected judgment would be perceived as that. But I'd be aware enough to know that that's what was going on. There was a projection perception loop. And in my journaling, I was writing as freely as I could. And I was also doing work with my emotional body and like playing with that when I was out. Like, what does my body feel like when I'm experiencing that in my field? And I was doing work, and I was like journaling and just doing it freehand. And I'd explore like, well, what are those, what themes are surfacing? Like if I'm paranoid and I think that people are judging me, what do I think they're judging me for? And it boiled down to a list of beliefs, and they were ways that my persona didn't want me to be perceived. And as soon as I realized that, I was like, oh fuck, this is it. And one of them was to be perceived as crazy.
Nice.
To be perceived as crazy. So there'd be like, is that guy okay? Like when I actually had like a real spell of this in my early 20s, I went through grief of a friend who died suddenly. And it was like this breaking down of, you know, I knew I wasn't okay, but I was trying to avoid it. And my reality just started reflecting that. So the paranoia would be like, oh, what's that guy doing? Is he all right? Like, why does he look so sad? That kind of thing. It's fucking intelligent. It's intelligent, and it has that message. And I share that because I feel that from that space, there's a call to engage and take on the hero's journey that I think can be part of spiritual bypassing, can be missing that whole landscape. And I feel that our development and growth comes from that balance of awareness and engagement, and engagement from like non-attachment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
That's the alchemy right there, the embodied alchemy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Oh, can I share one more thing real quick on that? So my experience of this is very synchronistic. Like I'll be in experiences will gravitate towards me that are part of this learning. And it always seems to be thematic. There's a theme that I'm working on. It's surfacing in my dreams. It's surfacing in my reality, in my journaling, in my thoughts. And I had this realization around not wanting to appear crazy, and the like kind of protection mechanisms that were trying to avoid that, as well as the beauty of my craziness, my eccentricity, and the kind of work that I do and what I explore. And you know, I had like a group of friends, my friends who were with me when I was going through this spell of psychosis the first time around. They visited Berlin, and it was a real practice of, you know, not seeing them in a few years. There was a practice of being able to be established in myself, and you know what was good for me and what I was going to engage in. And it like when I feel like it was so guided, but basically we were out. There was a lot of socializing, a lot more than usual. And on one night we went to a bar, and I had what would only be described as like a real non-ordinary experience in this bar of just like energetic, real intense energy, overwhelm, paranoid thoughts that kind of moved through me, through my system, and then dissipated. Like there was some kind of harmony going on energetically. But I went through this with all my friends there, and actually had the opportunity to articulate it from the worldview that I now have, from the paradigm that I now have, basically sharing my craziness to people that knew me and have been consistent in my life in a way that was like a crescendo of this experience. And then the paranoia is gone. Like that whole experience is gone after really being called to be like, I just had a crazy experience and I'm going to articulate it. And to receive, you know, if any of them watching this, like I received so much compassion and understanding, which I was just beyond, you know, and they're not even into this kind of stuff, but it was just like straight away, yeah. But I appreciate you having the space to hear that sharing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a real experience of going through this kind of ensoulment process for me.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah. And I feel the emotional component of it, you know. I'll be with that because I'm aware that, you know, there's that's the embodiment, right? And like I share that because I also love exploring this realm and I love articulating it. But the truth is, like, that's powerful on an emotional level. And it's like what you say, that's what I want for people. You know, I want that for people. Natalie, it's the first time I'm going to cry on the podcast.
Yes, yes, we love crying. We love tears. We love
this is so important, you know, because it's like the monsters in the closet, right? It's like, look, there's nothing to worry. Like, just understand this realm. It needs to be understood. And you mentioned the media and the way that these kind of fear matrix are created, and our bodies are constantly on hyper alert and vigilance. And if we can learn to connect to consciousness and that greater part of ourselves, and we can become curious, it's a miraculous terrain. That's when miracles happen, and they translate to what we call material. You know.
Yes.
Yeah. And that is, you know, that for me is the grace of this. That's the revelation. That's what. And I would also appreciate you just holding space for this as well, because that emotional aspect of this exploration, like, you know, it's also been huge for me, you know, connecting to that, like, knee shaking immense gratitude that seems to be soul recognition. You know, it seems to be like an entirely, and you might also be able to talk to this, like a whole new paradigm of emotional experience, like as if you've been experiencing like that much of the emotional landscape and it's infinite, right? You know what I mean? There are like so many different tones to joy. There's so many different tones to
grace,
to grace, right?
to kindness, to
Yeah,
beauty,
yeah,
to awe.
yes. Oh, is yeah.
And to sadness and to grief and to pain and to anger, and there's all
Mm-hmm.
this, but it's like, look, it's very hard to say that to somebody who's still at it, going at it and going, it's very hard. It's because, but you know, this is why I trust life. I trust life that you're going to go through your process. There's an intelligence to this process, and I trust you to go through it. Trust you. I trust you 100%. And even if people do the worst, like they go to, there's like, okay, I'm done with this life and this, they come back. So, okay, I'm sorry you're going, but okay, I'll see you in 50 years. I'll be here. Please come back. It's like, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, the soul is infinite. The soul is timeless. The soul is, uh, you know, and it is so beautiful. The soul is your soul. And of course, I will be quiet and holding space because I've seen your soul when you share that. And when you see the soul, there's nothing to be said. You're just like, wow, you're at reverence, you're at gratitude, you're at I am in reverence, I am in gratitude, I am in thank you, thank you, thank you. And there's no words. What can you say when you see a sunset, and when you see a newborn, and when you see, what can you say really?
Yeah.
When you go and swim in the Mediterranean or swim in the ocean, what can you really say to that? Okay, so well, it's blue and it's 50 degrees and it's yeah, right. But what can you say to the experience of meeting soul to soul? It's incredible. I mean, that's what you said. It's so important for me that everybody experience that. It's true, because once you tasted the most exquisite experience of life, once you tasted it, of course you want everybody to have it, of course. But the thing is, you can't force it, you can't accelerate it. Everybody goes through their process, and they have their own way of connecting with their soul, of working with their pain body, of seeing through the veil, and of expanding further to the next level and the next level. And there's so much waiting for us, so much as individuals, as collectives, so much is waiting for us. And we're gonna get there. I'm optimistic in this lifetime, in the next one, on this planet or another planet. We're gonna get there. I mean, I'm very clear, because life is stronger than anything. It doesn't matter what happens. Life is stronger than anything, and the soul. Yeah.
Well, one thing I picked up on what you said, I feel like it's really useful for anyone who's in the field, in practicing as a meditation teacher, as a coach, as a writer, or any kind of knowledge sharing, any kind of leading people to themselves. I'm sure you must have experienced this, or I experienced this. And I'll start with a quote from the Bhagavad Gita, which I think I put in my book. To paraphrase it, it talks about the path, and it says that so much in the beginning is like a bit of poison, and in the end is sweet nectar. And it's like you say, when you have that exquisite nectar, there can be an innocence and an urgency. And I felt it in myself, where it's just like, everyone has to see this, everyone has to know right now. And you point to the divine timing, the unfoldment, and people being ready also. And I share that, to have awareness around that process, and the kind of the innocent, the innocence of that as a source, but also the potential pitfalls of trying to force that message, which I've been in that spell in my own work. And the difference between that and just being aligned with yourself and in integrity, and trust that things will work. But there does seem to be like a divine timing element to it, and like not to rush. And it's like, what lessons, and it sounds a bit cliched, but actually as an experience, like what lessons are there to be learned before that kind of growth and evolution unfolds. And I don't really know where else I'm going with that, other than like,
yes, because
sense of urgency almost.
Because let's say we have a sense of urgency, and we want to bring this incredible nectar to everybody around us. But if they don't have the mouth or the taste buds or the even desire to taste it, and it doesn't matter how much nectar you feel they're home with, they're not ready. So when we talk about divine timing, we actually are talking about your own timing. You have your timing, I have my timing, your friend has a timing, your client has a timing, your book has a timing. And the timing is the birth of the soul that is birthing vessels, that is birthing ways of expressing. It has its own way. I mean, the wisdom that you have right now is different than the wisdom you had in 2018, because you've developed pathways, you've developed experience, you've developed ways in which now that this wisdom really lands perfectly on the pieces of your puzzle. 3 years ago, it may have not. Okay, so the divine timing is actually your own timing. It's your own timing in your own reality. This is why in Ensoulment 2, I pay great attention to understanding how you create your reality. It's not some philosophical, cosmological, psychological thing.
Yeah.
It's really understanding the nuts and bolts of your reality.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know your reality, you don't know your soul, you don't know your pain body, you don't know your landscape, and you don't know what's your impulse, where you're going, then what are you doing here, really? Okay.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
I mean, you're doing probably a lot of things, but what I'm trying to say, once you start decoding all these different terrains and different landscape and different countries within your own psyche, within your own life, when you start decoding and understand them, it's like, okay, today I'm going to Belgium, tomorrow I'm going to Germany, next week I'm going to Kenya. Okay, great. Okay. And you're doing it not as like an idea, next week I'm going to Kenya,
Yeah.
but out of an emergent, something that necessitates itself, that is emerging from your own moment. Okay. So right now I'm creating with a group of people a retreat center in Greece. I never imagined I would create a retreat center in Greece. Okay.
Yeah.
And this retreat center is like, it's like a healing center. It's about community, it's about love, it's about healing, it's about ecology, regenerative community. I never thought I'm going to do that, but guess what? It showed up at my door, and I was called to do something, and I just did one thing, and then all of a sudden I'm there, and I'm the co-founder. So sometimes it's not about, oh, next week I'm going to Kenya, or next week I'm going to start a retreat center.
Yeah.
It's about doing the next thing that's calling you, and all of a sudden you find yourself in a new terrain, and then you say, oh, I like it, I'm going to continue build a house here. Or you say, thank you very much, I visited here, I'm going next. Okay.
Yeah.
So these processes of understanding your landscape, not understanding, but really getting it, it's about getting it. Because there's too much emphasis on either the non-dual, bypassing that, or but ensoulment is all about the experience, and you see in my books, it's all about particles of experience. So the more you go inside your experience, your own personal experience, and you start understanding the landscape of your experience, all of a sudden this monster under the bed is not so scary. And this thing to tell to your friend at the bar, hey, I had this thing, and you all of a sudden you're naked in front of them, it's not so scary because you kind of know it already. I mean, I tell people about shit, sorry, that I don't like about myself, but I said, sorry guys, this is how I am, and da. Sometimes I work on it and I change it, but some things, this is how I am. So when you own who you are right now in the moment, and there's no shame, there's no fear, there's no avoiding, there's no pursuing. It's just like, oh, we're doing this right now. Oh, yeah, right now I'm dedicated to this. Okay. And then life will take you. That's what I'm saying. You don't need to schedule on Monday morning, I'm going to do the retreat center, or Monday morning, I'm going to work on my pain body. Life will show you, because you're on the ride. You're in a big ride. That's a cosmic ride.
Yeah. It's like woo-wee, right? This concept of going with the flow, like going with the current of life. Joseph Campbell talks, I think there's a quote from him saying, like, the purpose of life is to match your nature with nature. And, this, as you were saying that, it got me thinking about, the choice, because if we're creating, we also have a choice to, and I'm going to talk from the position of someone listening to this now, then even if there's not necessarily a sense of urgency, actually making the choice to take control of the timing, to be like, I'm going to choose for it to be now. I'm going to catalyze myself because I can. And I wonder with that, I can only talk from entering into that spiritual realm, into the psychic realm, because I had a lot of suffering in my life. And for a lot of people, that's the way. Like, they suffer, they want to understand suffering. Ultimately, they just want to feel good initially. They want to feel happy. They want to feel at peace. They want some kind of rest from that suffering. But I feel like there's a call for people to actually just choose to say, actually, I'm all right. But there is this sense of I think the Buddha talks about this, right? Like the dissatisfaction. Like, even if life is going well, there's this feeling of, and I'm talking of old paradigm or like Western material paradigm. I always had this existential angst of like, there must be something more. I don't feel like my consciousness is just a byproduct of a very complex brain that has evolved by pure chance on a planet in a universe that was fine-tuned to perfection for life 13 billion years in the future. Like, you know, you're like, oh wow, yeah, it's all beautiful, isn't it? But there's no God, there's no intelligent design. And it's like, how it's rational, it's logical, it's actually, so I'm gonna rant, I am ranting, but the existence of an overarching intelligence isn't like, it's the most logical and rational, as well as everything else, the embodied and the miraculous. Like,
Yes, but
you
Ricky, yes, Ricky, the thing is, the system that we created, the metrics that is right now in place, the kind of materialistic, so-called materialistic, because we also had to develop this, we had to develop the machine, we had to develop the internet, we had to develop our intelligence, we had to do it as a species, as an evolutionary species. But that's another conversation. But what I'm trying to say, you can even go to a place and see their age and their ensoulment age. You can come to our system and see how ensouled we are. You can just look at the hospitals, look at this healthcare systems, educational system, food production system. You can see how ensouled they are. So when you come to a system, or when you observe a culture, or when you observe a place that is relatively young in its ensoulment, it's like, okay, they're pretty young. Okay. Yeah. So you actually can navigate the places and the people and the experiences that takes you to where you want to go. Okay. So that's why I'm saying we got to disconnect from things that are not serving our ensoulment and plug into the things that are serving our ensoulment. And ensoulment is connecting with your soul, with your essence, with your truth, with what makes you feel good. That's critical. Because if you're doing all this work and you don't feel good, I'm sorry, that's not your soul way. Because the ensoulment process, of course, you can go through a rough time, but after the rough time comes salvation. There's mini salvations all the time. And if you don't experience this mini salvation, then something is off here. Either in the way you think, either in your approach, either that you have resistance to feeling joy and peacefulness and pleasure and touch and this, whatever it is. Like, you got to identify the mechanism in which you're creating your reality. Because all of your experience, Ricky, all of my experience, all of our listeners' experience, we created it ourselves. Some it unconsciously, some it consciously, but we created it. So wouldn't it be amazing to understand our own operating system? I think that's one of the most important things. And then to infuse it with soul, to infuse your home with soul, your relationship with soul, your workout regime with soul, your food with soul, your systems with soul. I mean, your books, infuse it with soul. And what is the soul of the book? The soul of a hospital, the soul of a teacher is the innermost essence of it. Is it the innermost essence? The truest, most infused with light and love? That's the question. And there are ways to do that. And this is what I talk about in the second book. Yeah. But that's another conversation because I have to go. I have another. Yes, I know.
Yeah, it's gone so fast.
It's the beginning. It's just the beginning.
Yeah, we'll talk again for sure. If you, this has gone really quick. I just, as a really nice kind of end point or pause point or break, you know, I love this because it talks to being your own leader. And actually, there's no teaching or teacher anywhere in this universe that is going to give you a lesson that you can't find within. And that's something we've been completely disconnected from. And there is that, like, understanding the dance of mind and matter and how these experiences are drawn to you. You see on a greater level that there are always invitations.
Yes.
And that was another part of this, you know, this question around the choice. I feel that the more aware you become, the more switched on you are to these invitations. But it's possible to be invited and not like take up the call. It's possible to have that kind of soul calling and to ignore it and to suffer. And I wonder, and I will shut up in a minute, right? I wonder the percentage of suffering, not pain, but suffering that is caused from not listening to the call, not following the inner guidance, and not just trusting that innate essential guiding system, even of emotions. And we need to be our own gurus, right?
Beautiful. Let's start this with the next conversation.
Yeah,
that's a beautiful
I'd love
question.
that.
It's a beautiful inquiry. Pain, suffering, and listening to your own inner guiding system. That's incredible. That's a beautiful inquiry. Yeah.
On that note, we'll close today. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really I feel the relevancy in terms of, you know, how long we've known each other, and we finally done the podcast, and I'm sure people will get a lot of value from it. And you made me cry, Natalie. So there you go.
You touched me. You touched me. It's so beautiful to be so open and so vulnerable. It's very moving. Thank you so much. And incredible questions, very deep questions. So thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I really look forward to next time.
Thank you, Ricky.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Take care.